So basically, it's something that substitutes for one of God's miracles. It's a cheap substitute.
So the power of witches is not a cheap substitute for miracle. In fact, the biggest difference between miracle and magic, for example, is that miracle is done waiting for deity to impose their will upon you. The power of a witch still comes from deity, but it's deity bestowing power upon you to do good for yourself. See, even in the Bible, God says that, He helps those who help themselves. What we're doing is helping ourselves. And it doesn't mean that power is somehow a cheap substitute for a miracle. In fact, many would believe that the fact that we have that power is miraculous. I can take you back to the story of Moses, where God imbued the staff that Moses had to do his wonders for him. He split the Red Sea and stuff like that. Moses was doing magic through the power of God. So, and this is the occult, so the understanding of how those things work, and how we get that energy is very much an occultic, idea. It's an occult philosophy, so to speak. So, no, it's not a substitute at all. They're one and the same.
Where God does miracles for His people, believers in the occult seek miracles by appealing to spirit powers or demonic powers.
You say spirit powers, and then you say demonic powers. But I don't think you understand what the word demon means. The word demon comes from the Greek and basically just means spirit. So really there's no difference to separate spirit powers from demonic, because the word demonic is the word spirit. The Christians have this idea that demons are these underworld, impy-looking creatures, and that may be partially true, but for the most part, demons are spirits, and so the whole idea that there's spirit powers and demon powers is redundant. Besides that, you forget to mention the largest part of the nature of where basically occult practitioners would get their power from, and that is from the divine, from deity. Whatever it is that you call deity. Some people would call that deity Jehovah. Some would call that the god and goddess. It just depends on what your religious background is. But there are Christian occultists out there who believe that they get their power from God and Jesus.
Divination is the occult substitute for God-inspired prophecy.
I'd like to note that most people who believe in divination believe that they are getting their messages from deity, not, being a substitute for divine prophecy, but it is divine prophecy in many different forms. I'll give you an example. Tarot, which is actually Jewish in origin. It's made from the Kabbalah. And if you read some of the older Tarot books, you'll see that they very much talk about how this is designed to interpret the will of Yahweh. So, and granted, there's a lot of people who aren't Christian who use the Tarot, but they still believe, for the most part, that these messages they're getting are from the divine, not a substitute for divine prophecy, but they are divine prophecy.
God drove Israel into captivity because they practiced sins that included divination and soothsaying.
God also in the Old Testament talked about how evil shellfish is and how people shouldn't wear mixed fabrics. So the whole Old Testament barring of divination doesn't really stand up when it comes to logic. You see, the thing about the Bible is that the Bible is one person's interpretation of what happened. The person who wrote those passages in the Bible, which is probably Moses, or could have been handed down from one generation to another, the person who wrote that obviously had the interpretation that something bad happened to the Jews because of something that they did. It's quite similar to Pat Robertson saying that Haiti deserved the earthquake because they had a quote-unquote pact with the devil or something, and they were doing voodoo and all that. quite frankly, just like people debunked Pat Robertson because that was his interpretation, he had no bearing or basis to call that fact. Same thing with these passages in the Bible. That's somebody's interpretation. We have no proof that that's fact, or that it even happened for that matter. Not to mention that, as I said, prophecy and dream interpretation, which were very common forms of divination in both New and Old Testament, are forms of divination. Just because one said that they got their message from God doesn't mean that they did, number one. Number two, there's no definite proof that the other forms of divination, which are, prophetic in nature, didn't come from God. Prophecy is divination.
King Manasseh of Israel practiced such and did evil before the Lord. The most common form of divination today, or augury, is astrology, which is why you shouldn't be reading your horoscope or anything like that in the newspaper, etc. Other example of divination includes reading palms, palmistry, Ouija boards, we've talked about that a little bit in other videos, tarot cards, crystal balls, dream interpretation.
This is where the breakdown of, your argument starts. If you're going to talk about dream interpretation being evil, then you have to talk about acts within the Bible where God gave people dreams, for example, Joseph in Genesis, as evil. Because if one interprets their dream, which is, if you look at the dream that Joseph had, where he had another dream about the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars are bowing down to him, that is obviously a dream that needs interpretation. And so the idea that dream interpretation is somehow evil because it falls into your definition of augury, it breaks down the whole concept that divination is evil in the Old Testament, number one, and number two, that it's evil in the real world.
Any attempt to transcend the bounds of the physical world without a body experiences such as astral flight or levitation. Remember that game? Stiff as a board, light as a feather, stiff as a board.
Just to let you know, that's not levitation, that's a play on physics. And it's a game that little kids play. It does not have anything to do with the occult.
Any type of mystical experience, seances, necromancy, and psychic healing also can fit into this category.
Actually, psychic healing, or the laying on of hands, is a very common and condoned practice within the Bible. I'll give you an example. Isaac blessed his son Jacob by laying on hands. And there was, Aaron, who was Moses' brother, and the high priest. They sought to transfer sins from the children of Israel to a sacrificial goat. They sacrificed a goat so that they could no longer be sinful. And both of those are types of psychic healing. The funny thing is that Jesus himself, healed a lot of people, and you might say, well, that was the power of God within him. Well, what's the difference between someone else using the power of God and Jesus doing it? Granted, you might say, well, he was the Son of God, but regardless, I don't see why that would stop other people from doing it if they're able to do it. And to mention, why would God not want people healed? That doesn't make sense either.
Now, necromancy. This is the alleged power to communicate with spirits of the dead. Some people call them ghosts.
You mean like when Jesus rose from the dead and his disciples saw the Holy Ghost? Just wondering.
People refer to this as, and the scriptures refer to this as having a familiar spirit, or a spirit guide.
Actually, no. Familiar spirits is probably more in line with talking about people who do magical work with animals. Also, spirit guides are also not necessarily human. For example, in shamanic culture, there are many people who have spirit guides that are of different animals, like owls, bears, wolves, so to speak. And what they represent to them is a certain type of energy that guides them along their path.
There are millions of people who claim this power, and hundreds of thousands of whom are spiritualists or members of spiritist churches. Yeah, there's churches, so-called.
Yeah, just because they don't have the same beliefs as you doesn't mean that their church is so-called. It's church. That's pretty disrespectful.
Magical manipulation, using hidden forces of the spiritual realm to manipulate people and circumstances.
Well, you kind of already covered magical manipulation when you started talking about psychic healing, because healing spells and rituals are part of magical manipulation. But I like how you use the term manipulation, because it makes it seem devious, doesn't it? Really, all people have the power to do what witches do. We all have this energy inside us. And sending out energy is as simple as the video that I'm doing right now. The video that you did sent out energy to convey a certain point, and so did mine. All those acts are acts of manipulation. So it's no different than, for example, video manipulation. You know, the idea that you use the word manipulation obviously gets across a certain point to you, and I commend you for doing that and try to get your point across in that way. But really, it's kind of disingenuous, isn't it? Because it's not really giving the full picture of what magical energy is. And if you're somebody who's actually studied magical energy and understands it, then you know that magical energy, like any other part of our body or any other tool, can be used for good or bad purposes. It's not just to control people, which is the first thing that you mentioned, but you can also use it to better yourself. For example, if you want to lose weight, you can use your own magical energy to help you with that. If you want to get pregnant, you can use your own magical energy to do that. If you want to make yourself more attractive, if you want to try to get a job, things like that nature are also magical manipulation. But I like how you use the word manipulation and go right into manipulating other people, because it makes it seem devious, doesn't it?
Practitioners include sorcerers, witches, and witch doctors. Witch doctors, yeah, voodoo practitioners, psychic healers, shamans. Let me see. There's so many today. With all these New Age practitioners, you know, anybody can hang out a shingle, and they come up with all kinds of new names all the time.
It's so funny that you say that they come up with new names, because all the names that you mentioned, you know, witch doctor, shaman, things like that, those are all ancient names. And the word witch doctor, and the word shaman all predate Christianity. So where's these new names that you're coming up with? The only one I can think of is faith healer, and that's pretty much within the Christian realm of occult.
Today, the tentacles of occult philosophy reach into every area of society.
It has tentacles now?
And that's really true. Police departments request psychics to help solve crimes.
And once again, you mentioned something of why I don't see why the occult as a whole is a bad thing. I don't understand why any loving deity would be against the police solving crimes. You know, and if they have a means to use it, why would that means not be God-given? And if you say, well, it's written in the Bible, then, you know, obviously we need to look outside the Bible sometimes for logical answers. You know, yes, you have that Bible, and that Bible is the crux of your faith, but that doesn't mean that all the answers for the entire world are located within the Bible. And that's one of the things that most occultists realize, is that the universe itself holds answers. And that, you know, if you're just limiting yourself to one book for all the answers, then you're not seeing the big picture. And so, obviously, when you look at things like faith healing and the laying on of hands and, you know, psychics helping solve crimes and things like that, we're seeing good done from the occult, okay? So the whole idea that good can be done from it, but yet you call it evil, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. How'd you like to go to court and be accused of a crime by a so-called psychic?
Psychics have been used to gather evidence and maybe lead them in directions that they hadn't thought of before. But once they get there, then they're able to find the evidence they need to convict somebody. Also, they're usually used for missing persons cases and things like that, finding and tracking missing persons. So the whole idea that someone could be accused solely by a psychic for a crime hasn't happened yet, and it probably won't happen.
Universities are offering courses in paranormal and occult sciences.
Many occult philosophies that you mentioned come from other religions. They come from shamanic sources and tribal sources. They come from different indigenous religions. They come from Eastern philosophy and things like that. But regardless, they come from other religious backgrounds, usually other than Christianity. Some of them come from Judeo-Christian beliefs as well. But they are, for the most part, from religious philosophies. So, you know, I don't think you'd have a problem with them teaching Christian religious philosophy as a degree. In fact, there's probably universities out there that do it. But if it's a different religion besides your own, now you have a big problem with it.
Well-known science fiction writers mask occult doctrines in their works through pseudoscientific language. Where do you think this so-called religion of Scientology came from? L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah, that's not a very good example. I'm not really sure how it falls into the occult, other than they have these auditing machines, but the majority of the occult community would tell you that that stuff is full of crap.
Leaders of some women's movements urge their followers to return to the ancient religions in which female deities are worshipped, which is a form of witchcraft.
I'm not really sure who told you that goddess worship was witchcraft, but it's not. It's really kind of showing that you haven't really done any outside research to the subject, other than maybe Christian sources. If you wanted to do a good informative video on the occult, I really would have I could have recommended you some better, more secular sources on the subject. But it sounds like whoever you're talking about is looking at it from basically a Christocentric, perspective. And that's wrong, because there really is no correlation between goddess worship and witchcraft, other than most modern witches believe in a goddess. But it's not a requirement to be a witch to believe in a goddess, and it's not a requirement to believe in a goddess to be a witch. There are plenty of people, both in the modern and ancient world, who believe in goddesses but don't practice witchcraft, and don't even believe in external magic. I used to volunteer for a group in Chicago that had over 400 members, and plenty of them didn't practice magic, but plenty of them believed in goddesses. And then the other side of that is that there's a lot of witches out there that didn't believe in any gods. So the whole idea that, you have to believe in a goddess to be a witch, and you have to be a witch to believe in a goddess, absolutely not true. And this shows, really, that you didn't do the correct type of research to do this video. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just trying to show you that in order to speak on subjects like the occult, you should have talked to occultists, not Christians.
Now we've even got some mainstream so-called Christian churches engaging in the worship of Sophia. Does that ring a bell?
Christianity really is and always has been surrounded by goddess worship. I'll tell you what I mean. The ancient Hebrews also believed in a goddess. There is definite evidence that early Hebrews saw that Yahweh had a wife, and her name was Asherah. You can look this up for yourself, and I'll leave you a link so that it's there. But for it to pop back up within Christianity isn't a very far leap. The idea of the divine feminine, I think, is embedded within us, and it's not a bad thing to see oneself as an extension of that. There's also, the idea that Catholics pray to saints, including Saint Mary and stuff like that. Granted, they do not see her as a goddess, but they do refer to her as the Queen of Heaven. And the term the Queen of Heaven was one that was used both in Egyptian culture and in Greek culture to refer to their chief goddesses. In Egyptian, they referred to Isis as the Queen of Heaven, and you can look that up in an Isis Unveiled, which was written by H.P. Blavatsky, which, if you wanted to do some study on the occult, you probably should have read her book anyways. Then the other one would have been in the Greek religion, Hera, and probably in this extension of that, the Roman religion in Juno as well. The idea that no connection between goddess worship and Christianity and the ancient religions and the ancient goddess worship is ridiculous. In fact, you can find archaeological connections that show that goddess worship was very much at the roots of where Christianity was formed.
Yeah. Even the American Medical Society endorses the search for new powers to aid the healing process. Yeah. There's all this aura healing of aura and using energy fields and Reiki, I think is the way it's pronounced.
Neither one of the practices that you mentioned could be considered new. Reiki was developed about 80 years ago, and aura practice, we don't know the exact date of origin, but by many accounts it's over 5,000 years old, which makes it pre-Christian. Seeing
more and more of this creeping in the back doors of the so-called medical profession.
How exactly does it creep in the back door? You're using all these euphemisms to make it sound worse than it is. But really, if there is a healthy benefit to the practice, then it's a good thing. And it's not really creeping in the back door. In fact, there's a lot of AMA journal articles, just like there is on cancer research and everything else. It's very much not creeping in the back door.
Is this saturation of occult philosophy a mere coincidence? Or is there an agenda being implemented?
An agenda? Ooh, it must be a conspiracy because it doesn't agree with your religion, right? Seriously, what if the agenda is healing people? What if the agenda is making people more comfortable?
Well, I would say they're a little bit more unconnected. We all know that we're headed towards a one-world religion. Well, did you ever wonder how they were going to get everybody to hold hands and see each other as equals? And
what the crap are you talking about? They? Like we're all like in cahoots? Like we all have each other on Skype? What? Seriously. There is no conspiracy, okay? Most occultists are first of all, they don't even belong to an organization or something like that. Secondly, there is no overreaching authority of the occult, okay? There's several different ideas that come from several different backgrounds, and it has nothing to do with any new world order like I know that you're alluding to, okay? There's going to be a one world religion. No, there's not, because if there was, we would all be brainless zombies, wouldn't there be? You know, we all have different experiences and form different beliefs based on those experiences. And there's never going to be a one-world religion. No matter how much Christianity wants there to be, it's not going to happen. Do you know what the irony is in all this? I'll tell you what the irony is. Christians complaining that other people might try to convince people to be part of their philosophy or belief system. The funny thing is that the only people I know, though I should say, the majority of people who are trying to convince people to be part of their belief system, like I've got 2 people on 2 different videos right now trying to convert me to Christianity, you know, the Christians are the ones that want a one-world religion. Seriously. You know, so if you're scared about that, you should be scared of Christianity.
And how they were going to get everybody to regard each other as brothers and sisters? Well, we've got Catholics and Lutherans and and Presbyterians, you know, and Anglicans and Episcopalians starting to see each other as brothers and sisters.
I'm not really sure what different types of Christianity recognizing the bond between their religions has anything to do with the occult at all. There's really no relevance to that comment at all.
Now we've got New Age stuff creeping into so-called Christian churches, and we've got spiritists and necromancy and this and that.
This might shock you, but there have been some pagan and occult practices within the church organizations for a very, very long time. I don't think it has anything to do with any grand conspiracy. That's this kind of, you know, foil hat type stuff. It's kind of nuts, actually. But basically, I'm going to show you 2 clips. One of them is from a Pentecostal church where they do something called Dance in the Spirit. And what they do is they dance, and as they dance, they feel more connected to the Holy Spirit. It's quite similar to speaking in tongues, where they feel connected to this larger presence by doing that, right? And then I'm going to show you another clip of a voodoo ritual in Haiti, where they basically dance to connect with their deity as well. Now, obviously, one is very much older than the other, but the 2 practices are quite similar. When you watch the 2 video clips, you'll see that one is going place inside a Christian church, and the other is in Haiti at a voodoo ritual. And so, you know, it's kind of funny that you would say that, you know, now all of a sudden all these New Age practices are coming up, when the practice of dancing in the spirit, laying of hands, bibliomancy, all these other things have been in the Christian church for centuries. So this whole idea that there's some kind of grand occult conspiracy, absolutely ridiculous. There's no bearing for it whatsoever. It's probably one of the least based opinions you've had in this entire video, is that there's some sort of grand conspiracy amongst all the occultists. We don't have to agree on things half the time. There'd be no way that we'd all be able to get together and do some grand conspiracy like that. It's crap.
So you got to be really sure, and if when in doubt, do some research.